Welcome to a very special remastered countdown with the Nitpicking Nerds. This is our top 100 official blue cards in the entire Commander format. Brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc. You can use code NERDS in the link in the description to save 5% off your order. And brought to you by Dragon Shield. You can use the EU or US links in the description to buy the best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
And support the channel at the exact same time. We are going to be analyzing the following.
Impact on the game.
Strength in the decks the cards go in.
Mana value.
Playability.
Castability.
Advantage gained when cast.
Card type.
Combo potential.
All these cards are being compared against other cards in the color.
And we're not counting budget or CEDH.
And ultimately, with any top 100 list, it's going to be subjective. This is our list. We've spent tens of hundreds of hours to put together this list. Now sit back, enjoy, and tell us in the comments all the things you disagree with.
Number 100, Walk the Aeons. Taking extra turns is one of the most powerful things you can do in Commander, and with the 2006 release of Time Spiral came a Time Walk with buyback. The going rate for an extra turn is usually 5 mana, but Walk the Aeons can chain extra turns with itself as long as you have enough islands to sacrifice. When you get to skip 3 other players' turns to continue building your win condition, the game becomes lopsided pretty quickly. Walk the Aeons even offers some convoluted infinite combo potential when you can bring those islands back. Number 99, Turnabout. In 1998, Urza's Saga launched and brought with it Turnabout. Turnabout's main function is as a ritual, untapping all your lands or artifacts and allowing you to tap them again for a huge surge of mana. When paired with cards like High Tide, you can really go off and produce a boatload of mana. If that was all it did, it would be a decent card, but it has some other niche uses as well, like tapping down a player's lands on their upkeep to basically skip their turn, or tapping down creatures either to protect you from an attack or to prevent creatures from blocking. Number 98, Mental Note. It's hard to believe Mental Note is 19 years old, but it came out in Judgment in 2002. It's a simple design. Mill 2, draw a card. As long as your deck can gain advantage by milling, this card will fit in perfectly. The key is to get more than one card's worth of value through cards with Flashback, Undergrowth, Scavenge, Dredge, Jumpstart, Unearth, Disturb, Eternalize, Embalm, and Aftermath. Graveyard Synergy is easy to find, which makes Mental Note one of the best cantrips in the format. Number 97, Thought Scour. In 2012, Dark Ascension gave us an updated version of Mental Note in the form of Thought Scour. The difference is that any player can be targeted with Thought Scour, so it's basically strictly better. You're still going to mill yourself most of the time, but once in a blue moon, you get to snipe a card found with Vampiric Tutor and feel like the best Magic player in the world. Number 96, Rite of Replication. Rite of Replication has been replicating threats since 2009 with the release of the original Zendikar set. 4 mana for a clone effect is pretty much par for the course, but this card goes above and beyond with its expensive kicker cost. Making 5 copies of the biggest threat on the field will put you in the driver's seat of just about any game. The thing keeping Rite of Replication from ranking higher on this list is the fact that it targets. If the target is removed from the battlefield, you get nothing, and if you spend 9 mana on nothing, you probably won't be a happy capper. Number 95, Shark Typhoon. 2020, the year of Commander, brought us plenty of goodies, including this awesome Spellslinger payoff from Ikoria. In Standard and Modern, the most common play pattern is to cycle the Typhoon for a shark and score a 2-for-1. And we'll sometimes take this line, but what we really want to do is hardcast it and start slinging spells. Go through the trouble of resolving this 6-mana army in a can, and you'll be heavily rewarded with a powerful board state. Number 94, Thieving Skydiver. I told you 2020 was the year of Commander. This next entry comes from Zendikar Rising. As just a 2/1 flyer at face value, all the power comes from that kicker ability. There's no shortage of amazing artifacts to steal in Commander, so Thieving Skydiver will almost always have a target. The dream scenario is obviously to steal someone's Soul Ring or Mana Crypt, and with literally every deck pecking at least one of those two, that becomes a very real possibility. Skydiver can also steal crucial pieces like sack outlets and even bombs like Bolas' Citadel. Number 93, Nezahal, Primal Tide. Blue isn't really known for its chonkers, but Rivals of Ixalan in 2018 gave us a beefy boy in the form of Nezahal. The 7-mana slot in Commander is very clogged, and it'll take a special card to make the cut, but Nezi fits the bill. It can't be countered and will bury your opponents in card advantage, which fuels its protection ability, ensuring Nezahal will stick around for the duration of the game. Number 92, Confounding Conundrum. Time to head back to 2020 for another Zendikar Rising card. Confounding Conundrum is an interesting hate piece against landfall decks, green land ramp, and fetch lands. This mini stacks piece would be a bit too niche for Commander, if not for the fact that it draws a card on ETB. This makes the opportunity cost of playing Confounding Conundrum extremely low, and lets you slot it in pretty much any deck you want to play it in, especially if your meta calls for it. Number 91, Leyline of Anticipation. Leylines have only been printed in cycles of 5, but for some reason we have 2 white, 2 blue, 1 black, 3 red, and 3 green Leylines. Magic 2011 from 2010 brought us the second blue Leyline, and this time, instead of being hot garbage, it was really solid. Leyline of Anticipation lets you play completely on your opponent's turns, allowing you to choose the best time to deploy all your resources and threats, giving you more information than anyone else. There's even a 7% chance you'll get to slam it on turn 1 for free. Number 90, Search for Escanta. In 2017, Ixalan gave us an awesome cycle of legendary enchantments that flipped into lands when a certain condition was met. Search for Escanta is mediocre card selection that eventually turns into ramp, but shouldn't be played if your deck can't transform it. The flip condition, though, is incredibly easy to meet and often requires simply untapping to do so. The land side works perfectly with counterspells and instant speed interaction because it gives you a mana sink for unspent mana. Think of this spell more as a Search for Tomorrow in blue that can draw you cards in the late game. Number 89, Mana Vortex. Here's a card from the dark all the way back in 1994 that sees very little play in relation to its power. Starting with you, each player has to sacrifice a land on their upkeep. People need those to cast spells. Landfall and artifact ramp decks can completely mitigate this downside and quickly make the game miserable for everyone else at the table. Mana Vortex is game-breaking early, but won't have quite the same effect later, which is why it sits here at number 89. Number 88, Transmute Artifact. Here's another weirdo card from 1994 in Antiquities this time. Transmute Artifact functions as sort of a Green Sun Zenith for artifacts. You need one to sacrifice, but then you're either getting a huge discount on your best artifact, or you're sacrificing an egg to essentially pay full cost for it. Those are both pretty sweet deals, and this tutor will absolutely pull its weight and then some in a dedicated artifact deck. Number 87, Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. War of the Spark was a set from 2019 that focused on planeswalkers and gave you one in every single pack. Jace is a card that has solidly replaced Labman, at least in our opinion, since he has the same game-winning line of text, but with more upside. He will most likely only make it into decks that can heavily mill themselves, but in those archetypes, he's a great win condition. However, there is a card that dwarfs even Jace when it comes to winning out of nowhere that you'll see higher on this list. Number 86, Venser, Shaper Savant. Future Sight in 2007 was a time of experimentation in Magic. Venser is one of a kind, as he can bounce not only any permanent, but any spell on the stack to its owner's hand. As a one-time use, Venser is just okay, but when he's in your deck, he's almost never just a one-time use. He's almost always combined with Flicker and Bounce to be as annoying and powerful as possible, and Venser can sometimes be the key to controlling an entire commander game. Number 85, Thassa, Deep Dwelling. Theros Beyond Death marked the return to the beloved plane of Theros in 2020 during the year of Commander. An extra enters the battlefield trigger every turn in dedicated blink decks can be enough to push you into the lead and keep you there, and 4 mana seems to be the sweet spot for these effects. What makes Thassa so special is that she is indestructible and oftentimes is only an enchantment. In fact, you want her to stay an enchantment because of how much harder she'll be to remove, and she can even tap down a giant threat in a pinch. Number 84, Embargo. Embargo is a card that apparently almost no one plays, originating from Mercadian Masks in 1999. Losing 2 life on your upkeep might as well be flavor text, and is well worth the upside of locking down all artifact ramp and creatures. In a defensive stacks deck, this will overperform, and it combos with effects like Blind Obedience to invalidate most non-land permanents, or with cards like Derevi that are constantly untapping your permanents. It's niche and a tad bit expensive, but Embargo can cripple opponents and grind games to a halt. Number 83, Midnight Clock. Throne of Eldraine ruined Standard when it was released in 2019, but for Commander, it was pretty awesome. For a 3-mana rock to be good in EDH, it has to have some bells and whistles, a bar which Midnight Clock figuratively and literally passes. With 4 players, it only takes 3 turn cycles to go off and refresh your hand. By itself, that effect isn't worth much, but it's adding mana every turn, helping you to empty your hand. If you draw it late game, you can sink mana into it to have it go off even faster. Number 82, Temporal Mastery. Avacyn Restored was the caboose to the original Innistrad block in 2012. With it came Temporal Mastery with a ludicrous $60 pre-order price tag. 7 mana is pretty costly for a Time Walk in Commander, but its miracle of 1 and a blue makes it a literal Time Walk, one of the strongest Magic cards ever printed. As long as you have top deck manipulation and brainstorm-like effects, Temporal Mastery will be a solid inclusion in your deck. Number 81, Treachery. Treachery is a control magic from Urza's Destiny in 1999 that is not messing around. As soon as you steal a creature, it refunds its entire cost by untapping 5 lands. After turn 5, this becomes a 0 mana control magic that can be flickered to ramp you and change which creature you're controlling. Stealing someone's commander can also be backbreaking for their entire strategy, and with such a low opportunity cost, Treachery will be a slam dunk overperformer. Number 80, Prairigan Drake. Sticking with Urza's block, this card is from Urza's Saga in 1998. Nobody cares about the stats of Prairigan Drake. All of this card's power lies in its combo potential, since it's a creature that untaps 5 lands when it enters the battlefield. It makes infinite mana with Deadeye Navigator and Eldrazi Displacer, and that's just easy mode. It's also part of a bunch of critical mass combos with things like Eternal Witness and Living Death as well. Number 79, Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur. New Phyrexia in 2011 was a set filled with nightmares and horrors, but the scariest cards to come out of that set by far were the Praetors. Elesh Norn has already made a splash on our top 100 white cards list, and Jin makes his appearance here. His main weakness holding him back is his high mana value. He's a 10-drop that requires a lot of time to pass to accrue value. That said, if he lives 1 full cycle around the table, it's literally game over for your opponents. You'll have access to millions of cards, and everyone else will have nothing at all. Number 78, Echo of Eons. This was one of the most hyped cards for Commander from 2019's Modern Horizons. It fell a bit short of the incredibly high expectations set during spoiler season, but it's still a house. Casting Echo of Eons for 6 means you won't have much mana left over to get first crack at those new cards, So what you really want to do is get it in your graveyard by milling, discarding, or even maybe entombing it, because the flashback cost makes this card almost exactly Time Twister, which is a card you'll be seeing in a much higher spot on this list. Number 77, Mind Over Matter. It can be a niche include since it requires 4 blue pips and lots of discarding. In most decks that do play it though, this is a dedicated combo piece. Commanders Arcanus the Omnipotent, Azami Lady of Scrolls, and Niv Mizzet the Firemind all allow you to draw your entire deck and win with a ham sandwich once Mind Over Matter is in play. If you want to get really cute and win with a Starfish, try the Elegath plus Sigiled Starfish combo. Number 76, Baral, Chief of Compliance. Aether Revolt from 2017 gave us Baral, one of the rare commanders you'll find in these top 100 lists. Baral slots amazingly into any Spellslinger deck. Almost every spell you cast with Baral on the board will save you 1 mana, meaning if you can triple spell with him, you'll get a 3 mana discount, which is crazy to get from a 2-drop that requires no further investment. Dropping Baral on turn 2 or 3 with 1 mana up is a nightmare for the other players, because they know a spell like Arcane Denial is waiting just around the corner. It's a simple effect, but it can dominate entire games. Number 75, Blatant Thievery. Blatant Thievery has been annoying Commander players since its release in 2002's Onslaught. The card has a very simple design, just gain control of a permanent from each opponent. Super simple, but super effective. Mind control effects are infamous in Magic as players tend to hate having their cards stolen. Blatant Thievery is special among those in that it lets you annoy everyone at the table and not just one person. Number 74, Deadeye Navigator. Deadeye Navigator is surprisingly the second entry on this list from 2012's Avacyn Restored, the most medium of medium sets. It's a bit overcosted for the effect you get, but the ceiling is very high for this card. It turns every 2 mana you have into your best ETB trigger and demands an answer, or it can run away with the game almost by itself. All that is pretty good, but what really brings it this high on the list is the 2-card combo it has with Prairian Drake and a better version of it that we'll see higher on this list. Number 73, Evacuation. The original printing of Evacuation comes from Stronghold in 1998. Evacuation is one of Blue's best board clearing effects. It's an instant, allowing you to hold it up and wait for an unfavorable attack, or fire it off before your turn to untap with no creatures on the board. Heavy blue decks often have low creature counts, so Evacuation will be a huge swing, or allow you to replay juicy Under the Battlefield creatures. Number 72, Ponder. Lorwyn gave us one of the best cantrips ever printed in Ponder. Since 2007, Ponder has been a staple of basically every format it's been legal in. In Commander, Ponder isn't as much of an auto-include as it is in 60-card formats. That being said, for 1 mana, you can't really get better card selection than this. Looking at up to 4 cards can really help smooth out your draws and increase your deck's overall consistency. Number 71, Phantasmal Image. Coming from Magic 2012 and 2011, Phantasmal Image is the cheapest mana value we've ever seen on a clone effect. Clone's strength comes from the fact that they'll always get to be the best thing on the board, but that's also their weakness. If nothing good is in play. In Commander, Phantasmal Image's illusion text isn't actually that bad, since most things that could target it would kill it anyway, making this a rock-solid inclusion in any Flicker deck. But don't try to target this with Ephemerate or you'll be very, very sad. Number 70, Personal Tutor. This card comes from the original Portal set in 1997 and resembles another card you might be seeing later on this list. I could sit here and drone on and on about how amazing tutors are, but no one needs to hear that. Just understand that this tutor is card disadvantaged, so just make sure whatever you're grabbing is worthwhile. Number 69, nice. Azami, Lady of Scrolls. Champions of Kamigawa in 2004 wasn't the strongest set, but it did give us Azami. Obviously, she isn't a card you'll want to play in just any deck, but in a heavy Wizards deck, you'll pray to draw this each and every game. Azami lets you tap Wizards to draw more Wizards to tap and draw Wizards with, which can all be done the same turn these Wizards come into play. The chain doesn't end until you run out of mana. On top of all that, she's also a 2-card combo with Mind Over Matter, number 77 on this list. Azami is a rock-solid card-drawing engine that can get out of hand pretty quickly. Number 68, Blue Sun Zenith. Mirrodin Besieged brought us the Zenith cycle, and Blue Sun Zenith is, you guessed it, the blue card in that cycle. This card has been the bar for X draw spells in Commander since 2011. Most of the time, you'll play this on the end step before your turn, letting you untap with a bunch of extra cards in hand. An X and 3 draw spell these days needs those extra frills to beat out all the competition, and Blue Sun Zenith not only shuffles back into your deck for extra uses, but can target your opponents to draw out their decks. Number 67, Archmage Emeritus. Coming to us from Strixhaven, Archmage Emeritus is the first card on this list from the year 2021. This design is an extremely simple one. Magecraft, draw a card. Archmage is a spell-slinging staple that will ensure you don't run out of gas. How has this card not existed before now? It's such a powerful, clean design. His one weakness is that he's a creature in your Spells Matter decks, but in his defense, he is one of the best creatures for that slot in the format. Number 66, Perplexing Chimera. 2014's Board of the Gods gave us this headache of a card. This may be a surprise entry on our list to some, but for anyone who has played against it, you know that Perplexing Chimera warps every game it's a part of. It basically prevents all Haymaker spells from being cast and redirects spot removal by exchanging itself, so it really only ever dies to a board wipe or when its controller lets it die. Decks like Amanatu and Rune that can flicker this after exchanging control of it are where this card shines the brightest. Good luck beating that. Number 65, Jace Vryn's Prodigy. JVP, or Baby Jace, is part of a cycle of creatures that flip into Planeswalkers from Magic Origins, released in 2015. JVP's biggest strength is his low mana value, allowing him to flip early or be a part of a multi-spell turn later in the game. Once flipped, he'll flash back your best spell, and if you can keep the board clear, you may be able to get a second spell out of him, which is a lot of value for your 2 mana investment. Number 64, Imprisoned in the Moon. In 2016, the Gatewatch locked Emrakul away inside the moon, more specifically, the Eldritch Moon. Much like Darksteel Mutation from our top 100 white cards list, Imprisoned in the Moon is an overcosted removal spell that gains most of its strength from its ability to lock commanders onto the battlefield without abilities. Some decks can struggle extremely hard to answer an enchantment, so you might be able to neuter an entire deck for the entire game and make one of your friends hate you forever. Number 63, Drown in Dreams. 2021 delivered 2 upgrades to Blue Sun Zenith that will appear on this list, and this one hails from the Midnight Hunt Commander product. Drown in Dreams is going to function exactly like Blue Sun Zenith in most situations, but in any deck that's looking to self-mill and gain card advantage by milling castable spells, this card will be a drastic upgrade, tripling the number of cards you'll see with your commander out. It also has this spicy payoff for infinite mana in that you can mill out one player and draw another player out at the same time. Number 62, Commander's Insight. Oh look, it's the other Blue Sun Zenith upgrade from Commander 2021. This is our pick for the best X and 3 draw spell in the format. You're always casting your commander, so the upside of drawing extra cards for free is always on the table. It can still double as a kill condition, but most of the time these spells are used to generate raw card advantage, and the ability to get an extra 1 to 3 cards for free, even if X is 0, makes this a stellar way to get ahead. Number 61, Arcane Denial. Alliance is released in 1996 and brought with it one of our favorite counterspells in the format. Arcane Denial is an easy to cast catch-all counterspell that replaces itself but gives its victim 2 cards. We prefer this card over counterspell, which is absent from this list. It's easier to cast, and the card math actually works out in your favor since you don't end up down a card in the exchange. For a more detailed explanation, visit our link in the description leading to our Arcane Denial short. Number 60, Fairy Artisans. Commander 2016's Fairy Artisans flew under our radar for a few years, but once I tested it out in a deck, I knew that this card was the real deal. For as long as Fairy Artisans remains in play, you will get all ETB triggers of all other non-token creatures, and on top of that, you'll untap with whatever creature entered last. The tokens won't last long, but if you can sacrifice them, you'll be getting constant value. On top of all this, Fairy Artisans can sometimes act as a great incentive for opponents to hold their threats. It's no fun handing out giant monsters. Number 59, Emry, Lurker of the Loch. She's the second entry on this list from 2019's Throne of Eldraine. Any deck with Emry in it will be casting her for 1 mana almost every time, one of the factors that makes her so powerful. She just does so much for such a small investment. Her self-mill powers her activated ability, which grants you access to card advantage, mana rocks, sack outlets, and threats each turn. If you have cards like Mishra's Bauble and Urza's Bauble, she now taps to draw a card. Emry is an artifact Swiss Army knife. Number 58, Clever Impersonator. Khans of Tarkir in 2014 gave us Clever Guy, the most versatile clone ever printed. As mentioned before, clones are the most powerful thing on the battlefield at any given point in time, and your range is much wider with this clone. Want that Bolas a Citadel? Boom, he's a Citadel. Want a Survival of the Fittest? Boom, he's a Survival. Want an Ugin the Spirit Dragon? Boom, he's Ugin. Want a Grave Titan? Boom, he's a bad magic card. He can double up your best permanent, snag a powerful ETB, or copy someone's finisher. Number 57, Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. Teferi as a character has been the fun police of Magic since 2006 and the release of Time Spiral. Since he both has flash and grants flash to your creatures, he works wonders alongside counterspells, letting you choose between interaction and advancing your board state at instant speed. The usual play pattern is to flash him in before your turn to untap and resolve all your spells without fear of being countered, making him great at protecting combos. Just be careful, since Teferi also stops your opponents from interacting with each other as well. Number 56, Amphin Mutineer. This is the first entry on our list from Commander Legends, released at the end of 2020. The first thing to get out of the way is that the 4/3 salamanders it hands out are nearly useless. That makes this a reasonable 1/8/7 creature, and exiling will ensure the threat stays gone. On top of the decent front sight, you also get the Encore ability. That means you can get a 4-for-1 overall, and it works extremely well with flicker effects, mill, and discard, adding up to 1 rock-solid removal spell. Number 55, Rising Waters. In 2000, Nemesis released, and brought Rising Waters with it, which is basically the antithesis of fun. If you think these abilities look familiar, that's because they are almost identical to Winter Orbs. If you don't know, Winter Orb is an incredible stacks piece that cuts players off from their resources and allows you to grind them out. But it turns out adding 2 mana and 1 blue pip, along with the untap clause, does remove a chunk of its power, but not enough to keep it off this list. Number 54, Omniscience. Commander is often about big and flashy spells, and Magic 2013 gave us one of the biggest and flashiest spells of all time in Omniscience. This is one of the best effects ever printed on a Magic card, full stop. If it resolves, the game is essentially over if it's not answered right away, and even if you have an answer, they might have a counterspell or card draw to cast for free in response. Casting it is one thing, but cheating it into play with cards like Academy Rector feels like, well, cheating. Number 53, Whir of Invention. Aether Revolt launched in 2017 with an artifact theme, and Whir of Invention is here to pay that off. 3-mana tutors are typically below par in our opinion, but this card has a few bonuses that make it great. First, it's an instant, allowing you to wait until you have the most possible information before tutoring. Also, Whir puts the card directly into play, which is awesome. Add in the improvise ability to really lessen the cost, and suddenly we have one of the best blue tutors of the past 10 years. Number 52, Temporal Trespass. It's been a while, but it's time for another extra turn effect from the 2015 set Fate Reforged. I don't need to re-explain what makes a Time Walk effect so backbreaking, but what lands Temporal Trespass this high on the list is that it can usually be cast for 3 mana in decks that build around it, which is a ludicrous rate. With such a cheap initial cost, the spell becomes very easy to copy and lets you chain together more spells after it too, so you're not giving up your entire turn to take another one. Number 51, Tezzeret the Seeker. They call him the Seeker because he's been searching high and low for artifacts since Shards of Alara in 2008. Planeswalker may be the weakest type in Commander, but that isn't keeping Tezzeret from crawling all the way to number 51 on this list. That's because Tezzeret serves as a sorcery speed tutor that usually leaves a Planeswalker behind. His +1 is also a great source of ramp in heavy artifact decks. He loves seeking Sol Ring and Mana Crypt, but can also find Basalt Monolith or any number of combo pieces. Number 50, Mystic Confluence. Commander 2015 gave us the Confluence cycle, which lets you choose among 3 modes and allows for repeat choices. Mystic Confluence is a bad counterspell, an okay bounce spell, and a below-average draw spell, but outshines many of those solo effects because of its high versatility. Holding up 5 mana and Mystic Confluence is the safest feeling ever. You're guaranteed to get value with one of the 10 different combinations possible with this card before your turn. Number 49, Pongify and Rapid Hybridization. These cards come to us from Planar Chaos and Gatecrash respectively. Both these cards are staples of decks lacking black or white and are some of the most efficient creature answers in blue, red, and green decks. The low casting costs combined with very little downside in the form of a 3/3 ape or lizard are what keep us coming back to Pongify and Rapid Hybridization for most blue decks we build. Number 48, Intruder Alarm. This is the second card on this list from the 1998 set Stronghold. Every time a new spoiler comes out, someone will tell you if it goes infinite with Intruder Alarm, like it wasn't broken before. This thing goes infinite with a ham sandwich, leading to easy infinite combos with any creature like Draven Doomsayer and Steward of Solidarity. In an Elf Ball deck, it can make each creature you cast into a ritual. The reason this powerhouse couldn't get higher on our list is simply because not many decks care to play it. It has too niche of an ability to get past number 48, even if that ability is insanely strong. Number 47, Factor Fiction. Factor Fiction has been the pinnacle of fair card advantage spells following the release of Invasion in 2000. For 4 mana, it will almost always draw you 2 or 3 cards at instant speed, and mill the rest, which will be gravy on top of the draws. If an opponent is a big enough threat, you can team up with a friend and have them make your piles to help take the other person down. They might even be willing to do the classic 5-0 piles to really gain favor with you. This hidden political side on the card only adds to the card's strength, but we like it even without that. Number 46, Snapcaster Mage. Snapcaster Mage is one of the face cards of the original Innistrad set from 2011. It's an extremely simple concept. The more cards he can flashback, the more versatile he becomes. Snapcaster being a creature has a lot of upside as well, as you can bounce and reuse him with things like Sublime Epiphany, Mystic Confluence, and Ephemerate, and really abuse that ETB trigger. Number 45, Palinchron. In 1999, Palinchron became one of the faces of combo with the release of Urza's Legacy. Palinchron is absolutely a one-trick pony. It wants to make infinite mana, and it does it better than most cards out there. It goes infinite with Phantasmal Image, Nim Deathmantle, Flame Shadow Conjuring, High Tide, the list goes on and on. Once you execute any of those combos, the game is all but over, as a ham sandwich will finish the game when you have infinite mana. Number 44, Phyrexian Metamorph. This is the 4th clone on our list so far, and it won't be the last. Metamorph was printed first in New Phyrexia in 2011. The blue pip might as well be flavor text because you're paying 3 mana and 2 life every time. Part of what makes this clone stand out from the rest. On top of that, it copies artifacts in addition to creatures, so we'll almost always get to copy the very best thing on the battlefield. Phyrexian Metamorph is even part of some 2-card combos with effects like Sharum the Hegemon. Number 43, Windfall. The Urza block just keeps on giving with this list. Windfall specifically comes from 1998's Urza's Saga. A wheel in the wrong deck is a group hug, but with the right strategy, wheels can be devastating, whether they be resetting opening hands or throwing players' carefully laid out plans in the garbage. In addition to this utility, when you combine Windfall with a way to stifle opposing players' draws like Narset Parter avails, you will probably win. With such a low mana cost and high ceiling, Windfall is one of your better wheel options. Number 42, Kindred Discovery. Commander 2017 centered around tribes and delivered the Kindred enchantment cycle that pays off the tribe of your choosing. Kindred Discovery is not only the best of that cycle, but is perhaps the best tribal payoff of all time. It replaces itself immediately when you attack that turn, and is great at literally any point in the game. The best part? It fuels itself. Slam it, attack with 3 zombies, draw 3 cards, then play a zombie, which draws another card. The fun only stops when you run out of mana. Number 41, Mana Breach. Well, blue could only have so many fun cards in a row before another strong but unfun stacks piece reared its ugly head. Mana Breach first saw print in Exodus in 1998. It's not a card I would ever bring to a Commander game, but this list is all about power. An early Mana Breach can slow a game way down and prevent players from developing. It's a symmetrical effect, so even the player casting it will be stifled, but they won't care much since it will play right into their game plan, which is controlling the board. Number 40, Agent of Treachery. Stealing other players' cards is hated in Commander, and almost no card does it better than this Core 2020 gem. Agent is the only card in Magic with an ETB that gains control of any permanent without a caveat. Now, stealing one permanent is great, but what you really want to be doing with Agent is blinking it, bouncing it, or reanimating it to get multiple triggers. When it happens twice, it feels like you can't lose, and if you trigger it a third time and his second ability draws 3 cards, you're obligated to set up a permanent residence in Value Town. Number 39, Reality Shift. Fate Reforged launched in 2015 and contained one of the best removal spells Blue has ever seen. Reality Shift is comparable to earlier entries Pongify and Rapid Hybridization. It costs more mana and does create the slim chance that they manifest a useful creature, but what pushes Shift above them is the word Exile. Being able to exile means you can answer a higher percentage of threats and ensure those threats will not be returning to the game. Number 38, Bribery. My co-host Joe Cherries has loved Bribery since the day he started playing Magic, which was over a decade after the release of Mercadian Masks. Bribery is as strong as the best creature in your opponent's deck. Luckily for us, this is Commander, and almost every deck is packed with explosive chonkers to make this card a house. Getting a creature with mana value 6 or higher means you're even cheating on mana. The only downside is that you may not know what a player has in their deck, so when in doubt, make sure you target the most Timmy player at the table for maximum value. Number 37, Glenelendra Archmage. Glenelendra is a location on Lorwyn, the setting for the 2008 set Eventide. Glenelendra Archmage is a counterspell on a creature, which is strong in its own right, but having Persist means you usually get to counter 2 spells with her, and that she's a pain in the tush to remove from the battlefield. The very best way to abuse this card is to flicker it or put +1/+1 counters on it to reset the Persist ability and counter as many spells as you possibly can. Plus, Threat of Activation means you'll be in the driver's seat as long as the Archmage is in play. Number 36, Swan Song. Back-to-back counterspell variants here. This one comes from Theros in 2013. What Swan Song lacks in versatility, it makes up for in efficiency. There are not many reliable hard counters at 1 mana, let alone hard counters that can answer 3 different popular card types. Oh yeah, I guess it also gives the opponent a stupid bird that never matters. I guess that technically counts as a downside. Number 35, Time Stretch. In 2001, some madman in R&D decided that stapling Time Warp to another Time Warp in Odyssey was a good idea. In Commander, it's hard not to win when you take 2 extra turns after a certain point. The advantage you gain from 1 extra turn is already off the charts, so obviously 2 is going to be even further off of said charts. 10 mana is a lot to pay, but Time Stretch is well worth it, and being an old school extra turn effect means it goes to your graveyard. With 2 full extra turns, you'll have plenty of time to get it back and take turns until everyone else at the table falls asleep and you win via TKO. Number 34, Stasis. This has been one of the most hated cards since the beginning of Magic with the release of Alpha in '93. Believe it or not, one of the most important parts of Magic is to untap every single turn. Stasis just says, no, you don't do that. The way to make this card work in your deck is to break the parity of this symmetrical effect. The easiest way is to use things like Teferi, Temporal Archmage, or other untappers to cast spells while everyone else is stuck being sad. If you can find an untap engine with Stasis out, it's probably lights out for your opponents. Number 33, Commandeer. Well, you knew the free counterspells were coming, and Commandeer from Cold Snap in 2006 is the first one on this list. 7 mana counters or 3-for-1 counterspell with a non-creature restriction is awful, but this is not your average counterspell. Commandeer steals the spell for you. Now, casting this for free doesn't put you very far behind. Usually when you counterspell, you save the table from a huge headache. But with Commandeer, you just take the headache to use for yourself, and that is pure evil. Number 32, Back to Basics. Wow, Blue sure does have a lot of strong stacks pieces. Back to Basics is the 4th card on this list from Urza Saga in '98. In Commander, playing more colors gives you access to a larger card pool and thus makes your deck's average spell a lot stronger. The trade-off is that adding more colors also increases the number of non-basic lands you need. This means that Back to Basics will be a total house against 3, 4, and 5 color decks and have a much smaller impact on 1 or 2 color decks. For power, this card is amazing. Just know that the better it performs, the less fun the other players will most likely have. Number 31, Glasspool Mimic. MDFC lands changed the mana bases of the Commander format forever in 2020 with the launch of Zendikar Rising. As with all these MDFCs, when you look at only one side, it's bad, but together they're like nothing else in Magic. Glasspool Mimic is a solid clone with a downside of only being able to copy your creatures, and is a land when you don't need it. This card is amazing for any blue deck with a decent creature count. Number 30, Treasure Cruise. Khans of Tarkir block pushed the Delve mechanic to its limits in 2014. This resulted in 2 cards that were so good they were banned in Modern and Legacy. Getting Cruise to cost 1 mana is fairly easy, as Delve is fueled by just playing the game, especially when your deck has fetch lands in it. It can mimic one of the best Magic cards ever printed, Ancestral Recall. On top of all that, you don't even have to Delve fully. You can use extra mana you have instead if you want to. Delve is a stupidly strong mechanic, and this is a shining example of why. Number 29, Gitaxian Probe. This new Phyrexia All-Star was one of the hardest cards to rank. It basically shrinks your deck size by 1 while triggering any spells matter cards and getting you valuable information. All it takes is 2 life, and you can easily generate more than a card's value with this. 0 mana. If you care about storm count or spell slinging or filling the yard, Gitaxian Probe will do it all for free. This is one of the most flawed card designs of all time, and we get to take advantage of it as a complete free roll in EDH. Number 28, Narset Parter of Veils. War of the Spark in 2019 introduced planeswalkers with static abilities, which more closely resembled enchantments with abilities. Narset's strongest asset is her static, as preventing card draw in Commander is extremely, extremely strong. When combined with a wheel like Windfall, number 43 on this list, you're almost a lock to win. You'll have a full hand, and your opponents get a single card each. On top of all that, she replaces herself with her minus while offering card selection. Number 27, Overburden. This gem comes from 2000's Prophecy. Overburden is a card that would see a lot more play if not for its unfun play patterns. When your deck has a low creature count, it allows you to avoid the backbreaking effect almost entirely. Additionally, hyper landfall decks can use it to take their strategy into maximum overdrive while everyone else flounders. Decks that rely on playing creatures will crumble to this card, and most likely leave the table with a sour taste in their mouths. Number 26, Force of Negation. Modern Horizons 1 in 2019 had a cycle of forces based on a certain other blue card. Sure, Force of Negation is a bit watered down, but this card is still great. 0 mana interaction is just amazing, as long as it casts a wide enough net. The weakness of Force of Negation is that it cannot be cast for free on your turn, meaning it can't protect your combos or important spells as well. Even with that downside, having a way to counter a non-creature spell while tapped out can be the difference between winning and losing. And you get to exile the target as a nice bonus. Number 25, Dream Halls. This card has only been printed once, in Stronghold in 1998. The price tag here is shockingly low for an impactful reserve list card. Dream Halls will let you churn through your deck with wheels and large card draw spells, taking you either to game-winning combos or to large single spells that'll just win you the game. What keeps Dream Halls from creeping up higher on this list, despite its ludicrous strength, is that it has pretty big build-around requirements. It needs a lot of card draw to overcome the discarding, a high percentage of spells that share colors, and the ability to win once Dream Halls resolves, since you don't want your opponents using this effect as well. But in the right decks, this will literally play out as a 5-mana Omniscience, and that is backbreaking. Number 24, Urza, Lord High Artificer. When Modern Horizons dropped in 2019, it finally gave us a fitting card for one of Magic's most iconic characters. Urza mostly only fits into artifact-heavy decks, but those decks won him literally every single game. His ability to produce large amount of mana quickly and spend it is absolutely perfect. If you really want to make players mad, get Urza and Winter Orb on the battlefield and watch everyone else glare at you. But overall, Urza's the complete package and will turn any reasonable board state into an unstoppable engine in just a turn or two. Number 23, Nexus of Fate. This was the Buy a Box promo for Core Set 2019 and actually currently only has that foil printing. For a regular extra turn spell, 7 mana is overpaying. Nexus of Fate overcomes this weakness with 2 incredible strengths. Firstly, it's an instant, meaning you can hold up counter magic and other interaction while waiting to cast it, then fire it off before your turn and take 2 full turns in a row. Nexus of Fate even doubles as a win condition because almost nothing in the entire game can stop this card from ending up back in your deck. That means if you mill your entire library, you'll be able to take infinite extra turns to win with a ham sandwich. The only way to stop this card is to exile it from the stack or the player's hand or deck directly. Without that, you'll have to kill the player or lose to one of the most inevitable win conditions ever made. Number 22, Pact of Negation. This is part of a full cycle of packs from 2007's Future Sight that give spells for free and make you pay the costs later. Pact of Negation stands head and shoulders above the rest in Commander. Free counterspells are obviously insanely good. We have this one higher than Force of Negation because it counters any spell and protects your combos during your turn. Pact is usually used during the turn you plan on winning so that you will never have to pay that pesky upkeep cost. Number 21, Dig Through Time. Here we have the other busted Delve spell from Khans of Tarkir. Everything we mentioned about the power of Delve before still holds true here. Build your deck to fill the graveyard and you have yourself a 2-mana instant that digs you 7 cards deep. Those numbers can't really be matched by anything else out there, which is why Dig Through Time makes it all the way up to number 21 on our list. Number 20, Time Warp and Temporal Manipulation and Capture of Jingzhou. These cards come from Tempest, Portal Second Age, and Portal 3 Kingdoms respectively, and all are functionally identical. This is the gold standard for extra turn spells. 5 mana is right where you want to be for 1 extra turn in Commander, and none of these cards exile themselves. That means we can recur these over and over and over, forcing the other players to watch us as we goldfish our way to victory. And that's just gravy on top of the already punishing effect taking a single extra turn can have on your opponents. Number 19, Consecrated Sphinx. Consecrated Sphinx released alongside Mirrodin Besieged in 2011 and has been a staple of Commander ever since. In a normal game where Sphinx survives, you'll draw a minimum of 6 cards each rotation, which is more than enough for you to maintain a tight stranglehold on your opponents. Usually this boils down to a must-answer threat that will literally win the game by itself if ignored. And if somebody clones this, the other 2 players might as well just scoop. Number 18, Spellseeker. Coming from the best 2-headed giant set, Battlebond, in 2018, Spellseeker is a great spells tutor on a body. Typically, 3-mana tutors are below par, but when you staple it onto a blinkable, recurable creature, all of that changes. One of the cool things with Spellseeker is that she can tutor for ways to reuse her own ability. Listing off all the awesome things she can tutor for would take forever, but know that aside from plenty of counterspells and removal spells, she can search for 12 cards already seen on this list, with 3 more still to come. Number 17, Sunder. Urza's block strikes again, this time with Sunder from Urza's Saga. This card is literally so good that hardly anyone plays it. This monster of a card is an instant and basically resets the game for anyone without a board state. You can set up by deploying as many rocks and dorks as possible, then slam Sunder to put yourself in a winning position. As an extra bonus, when you cast it on someone's end step, they'll also be discarding tons of cards in addition to being set back into the Stone Age. Number 16, Expropriate. The fun never stops in blue, does it? This little rascal comes from Conspiracy, Take the Crown in 2016. Expropriate actually introduces a little subgame. If 2 players choose time, the game is over. Taking 1 extra turn is great, but taking an extra turn with the best permanent from each player is borderline unstoppable. And 2 such turns come so close to a guaranteed win that I have no interest in playing that scenario out. It also requires exactly 0 building around, other than making sure you can cast a 9-mana spell. You can make this the top end of almost any blue deck and it will blow your opponents away. Number 15, Teferi, Master of Time. Core set 2021 was the Teferi set, and boy did it deliver on that. Teferi Master of Time is a complete house. It filters you into protection for him while creeping closer to that game-winning ultimate. His static makes it so it only takes a turn cycle and a half for him to ultimate, which is crazy because his ultimate is Time Stretch, number 35 on this list. If you can drop Teferi on an empty board either by ramping or playing him after a board wipe, you will force players to answer him or lose the game. This could potentially be the strongest Planeswalker in all of Commander. Number 14, Frantic Search. The hits from Urza's block just keep coming. This one is from Urza's Legacy. Frantic Search is a simple design that might look fair to the untrained eye, but if you've seen this card in action, you know it's the real deal. If your land's tapped for more than 1 mana, this spell functions as card filtering and a ritual, but even without that, this is the ultimate 0 mana Storm Enabler that is well worth going down to card for, especially when combined with graveyard or discard synergies. Number 13, Seagate Restoration. This is the mythic blue MDFC land from Zendikar Rising in 2020. The usual downside of MDFC lands is that they enter tapped, but the Mythic cycle can enter untapped for just 3 life, turning them into absolute free rolls for EDH. With these lands entering untapped, they don't have to do a lot on the front side. Seagate Restoration is a solid draw spell late in the game that can set you up for an explosive next turn, and even gives you the nice upside of not having a maximum hand size. I'm not clamoring for only the spell side, but the fact that this is a land takes it from unplayable to the 13th best blue card in Commander, and that's that. Number 12, Thassa's Oracle. In 2020, Commander players were handed the easy button for winning games upon the release of Theros Beyond Death. On paper, Oracle looks about as strong as Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, and Labman, but realistically, it's about 7 times better. Turns out that emptying your library in Commander is trivially easy, meaning Thoracle will win the game on the spot, no card draw required. It is one of the most prominent win cons, not just in CEDH, but the entire format. Oracle plus Demonic Consultation is virtually unstoppable without exactly counter magic, making it one of the best 2-card combos in all of Commander. But even in fair decks, Oracle is straight up one of the easiest ways to win the game, period. Number 11, Intuition. This is a very powerful tutor from 1997's Tempest. You could search up fair piles like Unburial Rites and Reanimator targets, or you could tutor up 3 game-winning spells like Expropriate, Time Stretch, and Mnemonic Deluge. If you're playing Kess, get Demonic Consultation, Thoracle, and Reanimate. The fact that this could be a 3-mana avenue to victory tells you just how powerful this card really is, and has us questioning why Gifts Ungiven is banned instead. Alright, it's time for the top 10. Number 10, Gilded Drake. Another Urza Saga card. I can tell you this is the last Urza's block card, but I'd be lying. This is a 2-mana indefinite mind control with the extremely minor downside of giving an opponent a 3/3 flyer. Gilded Drake could be thrown into any blue deck and be a solid card, but adding Flicker to this already fantastic effect turns it into a board-dominating force to be reckoned with, especially when Gilded Drake steals commanders. Number 9, Time Twister. Time Twister is the second and final card on this list that is as old as Magic itself. It's the only Power 9 card not banned in Commander since it wasn't considered powered during the format's inception. If you want a moderately played copy, you'll need $7,500 minimum. We think there's a pretty good case to be made to ban this card, but that's a topic for another video. Like we said earlier, the strength of wheels comes from refilling your hand, comboing to shut out opponents altogether, and potentially disrupting opponents early. The advantage of Time Twister over Windfall and Wheel of Fortune is that it reshuffles your hand and graveyard into the library, meaning you can redraw anything in the yard you might have wanted to redraw while hating out decks that rely on the graveyard. The shuffling can also be used to create Time Twister loops. Number 8, Mystic Remora. It was first printed in Ice Age in 1995 and is one of the best card draw spells in the whole format. It's often compared to a card we'll see a little bit later on this list, Rhystic Study. Though definitely worse than Study in non-competitive games, this little fish does a few things better. It only costs 1 mana, so you can play it early and keep players from playing out rocks or casting non-creature spells in an attempt to stop you from drawing cards. Its tax is also 4 compared to 1, meaning that though it will trigger less than Study, it will also be paid for less often. Honestly, this tax is impossible to pay, don't even try. Number 7, Cyclonic Rift. Rift has been terrorizing Commander tables since 2012 and the release of Return to Ravnica. The card is upside wrapped and more upside. To start, this is an instant, meaning you can clear the board of all threats your opponents control at instant speed. Instant speed board wipes are pretty much unheard of in Magic, but this is so much more than that. It doesn't hit your stuff, it bounces so it gets around Hexproof, Indestructible, and Regenerate, and it forces the player going right before you to discard extra cards. Cyc Rift also has an emergency mode of Disperse for 2 mana to get you out of a tight spot. The only thing keeping this out of blue decks is its below average fun factor. Number 6, Fierce Guardianship. Well, here we are again, yet another free counterspell. This one debuted in Commander 2020. It's part of a cycle of instants that costs 0 if you control your commander. Obviously, this is the best one. It protects combos, causes blowouts, and lets you tap out while still holding up interaction. Number 5, Mystical Tutor. This card is part of a mini-cycle from Mirage, a set released in 1998. These tutors are some of the best things you can do in the format, despite the fact that they're all card disadvantage. Mystical Tutor represents your best instant or sorcery for any given situation. If you can draw a card right after casting it, you'll have whatever you need immediately. It's the ultimate example of versatility. It can save you from dying, it can assemble your win condition, and it can do everything in between. Number 4, Time Spiral. We have finally reached the last card from the Urza's block, specifically from Urza's Saga. Time Spiral has the same effect as Time Twister, shuffling everything in and drawing a fresh 7. It costs twice as much mana, but it easily makes up for that by untapping 6 lands. So Time Spiral essentially costs 0 mana if it resolves, and can even act as a ritual if you have lands that produce 2 or more mana. It also gives you 7 fresh cards to cast with all the lands you just untapped. That's something that no other wheel effect in Magic provides. And also, in our humble opinion, why it's the best wheel in the format. Number 3, Mana Drain. Hailing from Legends in 1994, Mana Drain was a counterspell that offered the upside of mana with the potential downside of Mana Burn. With the removal of Mana Burn in later years, Mana Drain became a strictly better counterspell. It requires no building around at all. You can throw it in any deck and be happy about it. You'll be mana positive on almost every exchange, and that extra colorless can turn the tide of games in your favor, especially if you stop a giant clunky spell. No counterspell can do anything close to what Mana Drain does. Number 2, Rhystic Study. Do you pay the 1? This is easily the most annoying card in the format, since the rules of Magic require Rhystic Study's controller to pester everyone whenever they do something. But that's what makes this card so insane. It triggers every time an opponent casts anything, with card draw on the line every time. Opponents letting this live for too long or getting greedy and not paying the tax can allow you to dominate, or just give you enough resources to execute your win condition with enough counterspell backup. You can either respect Rhystic Study or lose to it in a few turns. Alright, here it is, the best blue card in Commander. Number 1, Force of Will. This was one of the chase power cards from Alliances in 1996. Even back then, it was pretty strong, and it's only gotten better as Magic cards grow faster and more powerful. Nowadays, it's well worth taking the 2-for-1 to gain massive tempo and board state advantage. All you need is another blue card in hand and at least 2 life, and you have yourself an unconditional free counterspell. You don't have to control your commander, you won't have to pay mana later, and it can work at any time in the game. The faster your games get, the more chances Force of Will has to save your bacon. Even after all these years, it's still the number 1 blue commander card. That does it for our top 100 blue cards in Commander. If you want more videos like this, check out our previous episode, the top 100 white cards in Commander. Peace out, Tribe Scout.